Thanks, Natalie. Despite how you just described me, slide number one, who am I? I'm a developer, lead developer at a consultancy. I've been to loads of conferences. I've spoken at some conferences, some that I think Natalie has helped organise. I've got embroiled, like I'm not a professional in any way, shape or form, but I've helped out. So things like DevOps, I helped. This year I organised a track, so I was a lead for the languages track. I've participated in like committees to help organise tracks before. And in the open spaces area, with Skills Matter and also with DevOps, I've brought open spaces kind of conference themes across from the US, across the UK, all as an amateur. So I've never been paid for it. I've made it up as I've gone along. And so what I'm going to talk about today is open spaces. And I'm going to show you some photographs from me hanging out at various open space conferences. So that's obviously me, showing that I'm in no way a professional, but I have been to a lot of open space conferences. This is the kitchen in Bruce Eccles' house in Crested Butte, Colorado. We'll see Crested Butte in a minute. And this is the open space conference, which was the first one I ever went to. For me, it's like the archetypal, like canonical example of the best open spaces conference. I've been to it loads. We'll see it in a minute. So prepare yourself for some holiday snaps of me at an open space conference. So I'm aware that kind of everybody here is kind of in the professional or kind of organising end of conferences. But I'm also aware you might not know what an open spaces conference is. Some people refer to them as unconferences, and they're almost exactly the same. I'm not entirely sure what the difference is, but I think open spaces are even more free-flowing and kind of self-organised. So what I'm going to do first is talk about what it's like to be at an open space conference, and then I'm going to flip it and talk about what it's like to organise an open spaces conference, just to kind of give you the two perspectives. I think we're going to have questions afterwards at the end. But if anybody does have a question, if I've kind of made something not clear, please stick your hand up. But we can then have a big discussion at the end because I love talking about this stuff. So the conference I went to is called the Java Posse Roundup, used to be called Java Posse Roundup, and then became called the Winter Tech Forum because WTF is quite a funny acronym. It was started by these 5 people. So the 4 of them started a podcast called the Java Posse. They got famous by doing BOFs sessions in conferences like Java 1. They all used to work for the same company that I used to work for, but I didn't know them through that. But the podcast was really how they got famous. They were one of the first developer podcasts. They met this person called Bruce Eccles, whose kitchen we saw earlier, and we'll see in a minute. And Bruce said, the conversations you have on the podcast, because it was pretty much them just talking about cool stuff that had happened, and they're quite opinionated folks, he was like, you should do this thing called an open spaces conference. It's just like, it's like you talking to yourselves, but with more people, and people kind of come and just hang out with you. So they did that. They recorded the sessions at these conferences and released them as podcasts. And then people like me listened to them and thought, this is amazing. And eventually I convinced my manager to pay for me to go to one of these things. So it's their fault. So this is Crested Butte. So we were talking a little bit earlier on about like the venues for conferences. Crested Butte, Colorado is possibly one of the hardest places to get to in the Northern Hemisphere. So this is typically, when the conference, because it's the Winter Tech Forum, this is not very snowy for Crested Butte. This is up in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. It's a 4-hour drive on a good day out of Denver Airport. That's after you've landed, checked out, got your bags, picked up your stuff, gone and picked up your hire car, and figured out how to get into the mountains. It's an ex-mining town, which is why it kind of doesn't look super glitzy, but it's now a ski resort. So this is Mount Crested Butte, so there's a ski resort here. But it means it's got loads of Airbnbs, it's got lots of accommodation, but it's kind of full of real people as well. So it's a small community. It's smaller than the village I grew up in, and that was 4,000 people. So it's really small, super wee. And it's covered in snow. So the first thing to point out is nothing is organized for you. So this is some people that I stayed with arriving. When you pay your money to attend the conference, you get added to a Slack channel, and then people say hello to you, and then someone says, how do I figure out where to stay? And someone else probably says, this is a good place to go and look for Airbnbs or whatever, or we're already trying to fill a house up because it's a ski resort, so there's lots of kind of rented properties, and it self-organizes. Bruce doesn't care. If people don't get somewhere to stay, people have slept on his couch before, but it's kind of that kind of thing. Super, super lightly organized, with as little to do as possible. And this kind of extends to the venue. So the venue, as you can see from the Virgin Mary in the background, the venue is a church hall. So again, it's not super eventy. This is like super professional. This is like really nice kind of personable space. This one's got pictures of the Virgin Mary, Bibles, loads of stuff. And Bruce rents this space for 5 days in February every year, and then a bunch of people turn up. And what happens is, on the Monday morning at 9 a.m., everyone's told this is where you go. We all turn up. Lots of people have been there before, so they kind of know what's going to happen. Some people don't know what's going to happen, and then this first session is where Bruce explains how everything works. Interestingly, these two guys here weren't going to come to the conference this year. They were in Crested Butte for something else, but someone thought they looked like developers, so sent them to our conference, and Bruce let them come for free because they were developers, and that's how they ended up at the conference. Because they were like, we'll snowboard next week, we'll just go and do this tech conference thing. So this is Bruce doing the opening thing. So what Bruce does is he explains, how to avoid altitude sickness, how not to get arrested for smoking marijuana in the street because it's legal in Colorado, but he also explains how open spaces work. So he explains there's one rule, or the law, which is the law of 2 feet, and that's the only kind of mandate, diktat for open spaces, which is if you're in a session and it doesn't excite you in any way, so like don't do this now, but if this was an open spaces session and you were bored or weren't stimulated by the conversation, it would be beholden on you to stand up and leave, because theoretically you're bringing down the energy of the session. So there'll be another session, so go over there. Or if there's no other sessions you want to go and get a coffee or hang out or whatever. That's the only rule. There's a set of principles which are the only things that could have happened are the things that do happen. The people who are here are the best people that could possibly be here. Whatever happens is the best thing that could have happened. I've said that already. And when it ends, it's over. So again, it sounds a bit kind of hippie-ish, but what it means is try not to bring any expectations. Try not to kind of to feel obliged to do things and bring things. Just relax and enjoy the space and enjoy the conversations and see what happens. And when that takes place, crazy things happen. He then explains the mechanics. The mechanics are how things self-organize. So there's a minimal amount of kind of ceremony, and basically it involves someone, to the extent now that Bruce doesn't even do this. The first year I went, Bruce made these kind of empty track listings. So this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And that's the first session, second session, third session. Now Bruce doesn't do that because he knows it self-organizes enough that other people do it for him. So he brings paper and pens and someone else organizes. He then explains how if you want to propose a session, you get a post-it note, you write the name of the session and your name, and you stick it on one of the empty slots. And that's it. That's how it works. If you want to go to a session and another session is going to clash with the session you want to go to, but you want to go to both sessions, you go and find the person whose session it is and you ask them if you can move it. If you want to do a talk which seems similar to someone else's, or not talk, run a session that seems similar to someone else's session, you go and find the person and say, can we stick the 2 sessions together? Because I think that'd be quite cool. So the whole thing self-organizes. And the final thing he does is he explains how to participate. And the best way it can be summarized is by there's a kind of phrase which gets used in open spaces, which is invert your participation mode. So the whole point is you don't lecture. Nobody has slides. Nobody kind of holds court and tells everybody what they think and everyone else kind of nods and smiles. It's the exact opposite of an eyes front conference. So invert your participation mode means if you typically lecture, don't, and like think about listening and asking good questions. If you typically sit there and are quiet, then figure out what you can, how can you drive the conversation along? How can you keep yourself interested? Because if you're keeping yourself interested, you're probably keeping other people interested too. Oh, and that's it. So it starts with empty slots. Here's an example of what it looks like when it fills up. The Winter Tech Forum only has mornings and evenings, it doesn't have anything in the afternoon, so afternoons are free. So they self-organize, cross-country skiing, snowboarding, 3D printing, and Go, the language Go. So in my experience, you go cross-country skiing and talk about software development. There's a picture of that later on. So like the whole thing, like I've been at like dinner parties and stuff which people organize at like midnight and people are still talking about development, so it's pretty much development all the way. But these are the kind of the concrete things. And you can see here are some of the topics people have suggested. What the fuck is big data? Domain-driven design, is it still a thing? Reactive programming, what, why, how? These are the sessions, right? So these are like, the content of the session could be very similar to like a whole slide-driven thing, but the whole group is talking about stuff. And you can see there's different rooms. Stained glass is one room, a piano room, the confessional, which is exactly what it sounds like, it's quite a small room. Downstairs and Rumours is a coffee shop. So we spill out, because it turned out that that wasn't enough. Lots of people wanted to do things, so Bruce went and spoke to his friend at the coffee shop. Could we use a coffee shop as a venue? And they said yes. So we just go and buy coffee. This is one of the afternoon activities. So you can see people go out skiing, they go and do active stuff. So instead of being stuck in like so this is a nice venue, so the point doesn't apply as much, but you know, the typical kind of conference venue with like no windows, no natural light, darkness, recycled air is the complete opposite, right? So people are still kind of at the conference, but they're having a very different experience. And in the evenings, there's things like lightning talks. So if people have done a hackathon, then people might self-organize a bunch of talks and presentations of all of those kind of things. One other small piece of organization that we do have, because only half of the people probably know each other, and the other half are people who've never been, we use Slack so that people can stay in touch. So therefore, if everyone says the morning's finished, we're all going to split up, but somebody doesn't know where such and such a house is to go and do some hackathon or whatever, they can put the message on Slack and like chat to people, and everyone kind of chips in and looks after people. So you can see, they were going to build something with AWS Lambda. Oh yeah, and people have like brought in bits of electronics and all this kind of stuff. So people just bring all the kind of cool stuff that they want to bring in. And they use it to stay in touch. Also, this stays open all year, so we're all still hanging out on this all year. So therefore, when someone pays money 3 months before the next conference, we all say hello, and people get to ask questions and all this kind of stuff. The last slide's a boring picture of the website, but the reason I've put it up is because, so this is me, I love open spaces, so this is me saying it took me to places I never imagined I would go, intellectually, emotionally, career-wise, and geographically. So I like it. But tons of other people do. The amount of people who kind of go there and think that how can something which is not organized in any way, shape, or form be so awesome is amazing. So there's loads of these kind of testimonials on the website, which is amazing. So that's what it's like to attend an Open Spaces conference. How do you curate an Open Spaces conference? This is us. This is not me. This is other people doing karaoke, because I will never ever do karaoke in a Tibetan karaoke lounge, which is what it's like in Crested Butte. The reason I've used this picture is because like magical stuff happens. So things that you don't think you're going to see a bunch of engineers singing The Time Warp, especially when everyone else looks like some kind of crazy ski type person. But it happens, and it happens because people. It is a magical place. Loads of kind of the people build up their trust. They get to know each other. Really interesting things happen. How can that happen if it's a self-organizing conference? Is it just because the right people have turned up? Because this is a question lots of people ask. Would it happen all over the place, or is it just because you're lucky and these people are cool people? So no. So this is Bruce, who organizes the conference. Bruce actively, during the conference, makes a point of making it look like he's doing nothing. So he'll be stroking dogs, or just doing a ton of other stuff. And when I first went to the conference, for the first 4 or 5 years possibly, I really was under the impression that Bruce did absolutely nothing. One year Bruce had broken his leg, and so was so doped up on drugs that he literally did nothing, because he was kind of comatose half the time. But what I wasn't aware of was the preparation he put in before, and the stuff that he was kind of doing afterwards and in between and in the gaps. And so what I realized he was doing, because I spoke to him after 4 or 5 years because I wanted to bring this conference to the UK, it was conscious space making. So he's making sure that people felt safe. He was making sure that people felt welcome. He was making sure that people understood, because these are software engineers, right? So massively socially aware. So if you take away all the rules, if it's a conference, then you know, because there's a schedule and you know where to go and you know what to do and you sit in the dark and you listen to the slides and maybe you queue up and ask a question of the speaker at the end. This is totally different. So what do you do? And so lots of it is him just doing little stuff around the corner. Pizza kills. Yes, so this is what Bruce does. And it turned out that, so I was kind of aware of this anyway, so my parents are Quakers. So Quakerism is a kind of like the religious version of open spaces conferences. Quakerism, they've got no kind of, you know, you go into, like, there's an allotted time, you go and sit in a circle, and if you think that you should say something because you feel like you want to say something, you say something, which is a bit like open spaces. But that's a bit vulnerable to someone walking in off the street who wants to proclaim themselves the next, you know, Messiah. How do you handle that? So I was interested in this, and I spoke to my mum. And it's the same way that Bruce handles people who come in and abuse the rules. So if someone comes in and says they're the next Son of God in a Quaker meeting, they will let that happen. After the meeting, this kind of stuff will kick in, right? So they'll make sure they don't make people feel unsafe. They'll make sure that people kind of need to get stuff off their chest, because sometimes, you know, there'll be a reason for them doing it. Bruce will do the same thing. So if someone's lecturing, he'll let them lecture. He'll try and use kind of just social cues within the session to bring in other people, and if it fails, it fails. Because if he humiliated that person in front of everyone, then they could go off and really destroy stuff and really make stuff uncomfortable for people, and that's the comfort of the group as a whole is far more important, even if it kind of bumps along a little bit. So that's the kind of stuff that Bruce does. We used to think that that was all we needed. We do now, explicitly at the Winter Tech Forum, and ones that I've put on subsequently, have a code of conduct. The reason we have a code of conduct is because Matt Brandt, who's a lead at Mozilla, he wanted to bring along 3 of his co-workers. One of his co-workers refused to come to any conference which didn't have a code of conduct. So we wrote a code of conduct, kind of took it from OSCON, I think, and like tweaked things a little bit. That person was then very happy. It turned out that the creation of the code of conduct made us as a group, because we wrote it as a group using GitHub, it made us a lot more confident in who we were and kind of what the parameters of the conference were. So it made it better for all of us. It caused some interesting debates, but it was good. And the last bit about, oh, not last bit, the next bit is about the space. So this is a bad photograph, I've realized, because the only thing that needs to be set up is you need seats, and they need to be arranged in a circle. This is us about to do a lightning talk, so they're arranged theatre style. But you can imagine this space. This is what's called the stained glass room, because this here is a massive big stained glass window. Typically, and this is the room where you saw Bruce standing up, because there's the Virgin Mary, it's arranged in a big circle, and if it's a small group, then everyone brings the circles in, the chairs in smaller, and that's it. It doesn't need to be, you know, this space could be somewhere where you could do an open space conference, right? I've done them in lots of different places. The next room is through that partition wall, so things I have learned, you do need partitions, because otherwise conversations will spill over and people won't know what's going on, so you do kind of need, you know, like you could use that room through there and all this kind of stuff. And it doesn't need to be in the same building. Like I say, we overspilled into a coffee shop down the road, so that's a kind of thing that you can do. I tried to then think of stuff that conference professional people, event professionals would ask. Swag. Most of my stickers have come from this conference. Bruce doesn't try and like get people to bring swag, but he doesn't discourage it. So if people want to bring free Netflix stuff, which is probably on here, there's definitely Mozilla stickers, My Little Pony, GitHub stickers, because people come from like GitHub and Netflix and all that kind of stuff. They just leave them on a pile on a table at the back. What's cool is we now encourage people to kind of get a spreadsheet and say who would like stickers. Then you fill in a spreadsheet so we can bring the right numbers of stickers and the right numbers of t-shirts and the right size of t-shirts, so we don't over-provision tons of stuff and then leave them in a big cardboard box somewhere in North America. So that's kind of cool. Sometimes, however, companies insist in like doing extra stuff. So Netflix hired a lot of people out of this conference, including almost me. But then my wife got pregnant with our daughter. So Bruce, again, doesn't stand in the way. If people want to sponsor things, Bruce is like, well, we've got this dinner on the Friday night, if you want. Do you want to pay for the venue? So Netflix paid for the venue, and I think Mozilla paid for the food. So they can if they want, and then everybody's chuffed, and like someone stands up and says, I'm from Netflix, we're really chuffed that you came here. We probably try and hire you afterwards, but we've paid for the yurt. So. And then that brings up, there's one last problem. And I think this is my final slide. Oh no, it's almost final slide. The problem that we also encountered, and I encountered this, was if you're trying, this conference is amazing and it will transform you as a developer, whatever the theme of the conference is, I confidently believe it will make you better. The problem is it's so unstructured, and so it sounds like a skiing holiday that your work's paying for, and it's a million miles away. So this is, if you want to fly to Crested Butte, you end up in a tiny plane, which costs a fortune and all of this kind of stuff. Convincing your boss to go is hard. What they've learned to do at the Winter Tech Forum is they come up with a theme which is ignored when you attend the conference, but it sounds good to your manager. And they even went to the extent of 1 or 2 years with writing kind of co-creating draft business cases, which people could share to their managers, and if it worked, they'd kind of feed back, and then other people could send it out to the managers. Because when you've been, your boss will see the benefit, because you'll come back with all this, like I was speaking to the Netflix folks about literally how they provision, how they do things in Netflix, not the marketing slides, but the real stuff. And people see the benefit, but they need to kind of get over the hurdle for paying for you the first time. So any conclusions? I think if you want, I would encourage everybody, if you're going to organize stuff, we organize these within our company. I've organized them within my previous company and within ThoughtWorks. Someone said it was like listening to the organization, and we've managed to get loads of super senior people who've joined 3 months ago, people from different parts of the business, people from different geographies and stuff, to come together and just talk about stuff with no preset agenda. And everybody loved it, and like someone said, it was like listening to the organization. But what are the kind of the key takeaways? So the key takeaways are, because if you're an event professional, there must be something to you. There is a need for you, but not in the kind of typical mode that I see all the event professionals that I know. So like running around, looking stressed, having no sleep, just like, it looks like a stressful, horrible job, which I would be terrible about. It's in the fun, human experience, facilitation, like kindness, amplifying thing. They take up a lot less time. When you get confident, you can like seriously mess around with them, because we try experiments every year, some of which fail, some of which are cool. And I think it will restore your faith in humanity. Because again, like I say, sometimes, like I thought eyes front conferences were cool, and then I spoke to some of my friends who organize them, and like sometimes it brings out they'll have like code of conduct violations and all this kind of stuff, and like kind of nasty stuff. Whereas I think this generally, I think it'll kind of restore your faith in humanity. That's it. But don't ask me questions.